Culture Secretary, good to speak to you, though, this morning. We've just been discussing, you probably were trying to get into your seat, but we've just been discussing the situation in Ukraine and Donald Trump's extraordinary and extreme comments and, in some cases, falsehoods that he's been saying. Where does this leave the UK government? What will you be telling Sir Keir Starmer to do if that were your position to advise him? In tackling this, what approach can be taken?
Well, we do discuss these matters often as a cabinet, as you can imagine. And in the last few days, you'll have seen the approach that the Prime Minister is taking. He met with European leaders over the weekend. He spoke to President Zelensky last night to affirm our support for him and for Ukraine. There can be no negotiations about Ukraine without Ukraine, and our position remains unchanged. But we also believe that the United States is and remains a very important partner for the UK, especially when it comes to the future of Ukraine. And that's why the Prime Minister is travelling to the United States next week to talk to President Trump about this. We're very encouraged by some of the comments that we've seen from the US Secretary of State about nothing being off the table at this stage. I think the President wants to see an end to the situation in Ukraine, and that can only be in the interests of the whole of Europe and the British people. So we're encouraged by the progress that is being made, and we need cool heads to take the temperature down and to bring parties round the table in order to resolve this.
That's a very calm and positive spin on what must be diplomatically the biggest nightmare for a British government to have to deal with for decades. You've got, as you say, our main partner, America, who we've relied on since World War II and indeed before then, with a president who is talking nonsense, who's saying that the invasion of Ukraine was Ukraine's fault and that he could have stopped it, etc., and that the democratically elected leader of Ukraine is, in fact, a tin-pot dictator. It's going to be very hard for our Prime Minister to sit next to President Trump next week if he comes out with stuff like that and not say something.
Well, we've got our own view of the United Kingdom. The Prime Minister made it clear last night to President Zelensky that we consider him to be the elected leader of Ukraine, democratically elected. The reason there haven't been elections in Ukraine is because of Russian aggression, and we affirmed our support for him. But we cannot allow the alliance to fracture. The United States, Europe and the UK must stand together in the face of Russian aggression, bring parties around the table. In the end, there is only a diplomatic solution to this crisis, and it's one that the Prime Minister is well suited to pursue. Having worked in Northern Ireland as the Director for Public Prosecutions, we have long experience in this country of very challenging situations, difficult negotiations. You have to pursue them with patience. You can't comment on every single comment that is made by different leaders. There will be differences of opinion. That is certainly true within Europe as well as with the United States, but we cannot allow that alliance to fracture. We're absolutely clear about that, and that is the role that the UK intends to play, is to hold that alliance together and to support Ukraine.
Very strong wish and will there, though. But what happens if he's standing there, Keir Starmer, next to Donald Trump, and he repeats some of these comments, or indeed says something completely different and equally as surprising? How does he stay standing next to him next week?
Well, we've stood with the American people for generations through different administrations, and our relationship remains strong and deep and absolutely essential, both to America, to the UK and to the rest of the world. We still cooperate with the US on matters like defence and security. They're one of our closest partners and will continue to be. That doesn't mean we can't take a different view about issues like Ukraine, but I don't think we are in a different place fundamentally from the US. If you listen to what the Defence Secretary has said recently, if you listen to what Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, has said, they want a solution to this crisis. They want to bring all parties around the table. No options are off the table. I've always found the Trump administration, when they were previously in office, to be very pragmatic. I think they'll continue to be pragmatic, and the Prime Minister is looking forward to being able to have that that private conversation with President Trump next week. We are optimistic that despite the many challenges that this presents, that we will be able to hold together and find a solution.
All right. Well, let's move on to your number one item on the agenda for your department this morning. You're announcing £270 million in extra funding for the arts and cultural venues. Can we afford that?
We can't afford not to, is the honest answer. We've had flatlining, stagnating growth in this country for a very long time, and people have paid a very heavy price. The creative industries are one of the fastest growing industries in the UK. They're worth over £100 billion to the UK's economy, but they've got brakes on them at the moment. We've got far too few young people being able to access arts and culture. They've been erased from our classrooms and communities over the last decade. And what we're announcing today is an Arts Everywhere Fund in memory of Jenny Lee, the first ever arts minister, who published the UK's first ever plan for the Arts White Paper, 60 years ago this year, that will ensure that those really fundamental things that allow young people to access the arts, to get the skills they need to work in these fast-growing industries and take the brakes off these industries, exist in every community everywhere, whether it's local theatre, libraries, civic museums. These things matter in our country. They matter to our economy and they matter to people and our community life. And that's why we're determined to back them.
What would you say to a voter who you might meet out on the street later today who says, when it comes to a choice between potholes and paintings, I'd rather we fix the potholes?
Well, of course we've got to fix the potholes, and we did announce a plan to do that. But what we can't accept is that when it comes to the UK and the incredible talent that we have, we're one of only 3 net exporters of music in the world. We send film, TV, literature, music all over the world. We have companies like Warner, Amazon, Disney clamouring to invest here in every region of the UK. What we can't accept is that we're not equipping the next generation to get those jobs. You know, Richard, as I do, that Manchester has had a great flourishing creative life.
Yeah.
The Royal Exchange, what was the Corner House, now Home. These things really do help to boost the economy and create good jobs and growth in every corner of the country, but they've not been available to people for far too long.
No, indeed. And is this a one-off payment? Because, of course, one of the financial breaks, there's the arts world saying it's been put on by the Chancellor. National insurance rate is going to cost an extra 25 grand a year for lots of these facilities. So is it just going to be wiped away, this 270 million, by what the government's done on the other side?
No, the money that we're announcing today is for long-standing problems like building maintenance. Anyone who's visited a local or regional theatre recently will know that there are real problems with stages being closed, with buckets catching leaks from the ceiling.
Jobs and opportunities.
We've got
if they
crumbling
can't
infrastructure.
Afford to hire the people with that of the minimum wage, will they? It feels to some like it's take with one hand, give with another.
Well, I don't accept that, because if you talk to any theatre in the country, if you talk to local libraries and civic museums, they know that they rely on transport infrastructure, they rely on the potholes being filled, they rely on a healthy workforce, all these things that have to be funded from somewhere. And that's why the Chancellor took the decision that she took at the autumn statement to raise national insurance contributions. Okay. Theatres, museums, libraries will benefit from that, as does the rest of the country. And that's why, don't take my word for this. If you look across the board today, this announcement has been widely welcomed by the British Libraries Association, by the Royal Ballet, by the National Theatre, arts and cultural organisations across the board, because it addresses the long-standing issues that the last government failed to grip.
Lisa Nandy, very quick question to finish with. You know what the Westminster rumour mill's like. There's a rumour that your job isn't safe, that there's a reshuffle coming up, and you won't be here after that, politically speaking. What's the answer?
Well, look, I've been around in politics for long enough to know that you don't trust everything that you read. I've been in, I've been out, I've been up, I've been down. The one thing that I've always known is that it's an absolute privilege to serve, and you make the most of it to make life better for people in this country. Okay. I'm thoroughly enjoying it. You can see that we're cracking on with the job, and we're determined that this country is going to get better, because that's what people voted for at the last election.
Lisa Nandy, thank you
Lisa,
very
good
much
to
indeed.
speak to you this morning. There were a variety of expressions there from Ava and Kwasi Kwarteng to those comments, so we'll see what was behind them in a moment. Good to speak to you this morning.
Back soon.